They started the year like a power couple. Trump and Musk trading compliments, aligning visions, hyping each other up like it was some billionaire buddy movie about saving the world. But now, they're throwing digital punches across Truth Social and X. It's messy, it's public, and it's familiar. Because this isn't just about two massive egos colliding. This happens in companies, in teams, in leadership structures, everywhere, just on a smaller scale. So today, we're not gossiping, we're unpacking. What actually happens when people at the top clash? Is it possible to lead without constantly looking over your shoulder? And if you're stuck between power players, as so many of us are, how do you survive it without losing your voice? Let's talk about power, ego, and how to navigate career traps before they trap you. Welcome to Mind the Gap. Steven, how are you doing?
Good, Joel. How are you doing today? It's good to see
I'm
you.
doing great. I'm back in, you too. I'm back in Germany. I
Nice.
left 110,000 Seoul city in Norway, and the first thing I saw in Germany was the Berlin main train station, which was a culture shock if you've lived in Norway, where everything is pretty easygoing and chill. It's great weather. I can't translate it into Fahrenheit. It's in the mid 20s Celsius. I guess that's
Okay.
like the 80s,
Yeah, yeah, 70s.
roughly.
Yeah, yeah,
Yeah,
yeah.
something like that. No, it's great. Leipzig, it's showing its best side. It's a nice place to be in during the summer. It's not too warm. It's nice and airy. It has some wind, so it's good. Yeah, happy to be back home. Although I kind of miss Norway already.
It's always nice to come back home. It always is.
Absolutely. Yeah. Well, Trump and Musk. I mean, we not just have different opinions and perspectives at times, but we also have very different geographical locations. And I don't think anyone that's not living underneath a rock has been able to miss the events unfolding between Donald Trump and Elon Musk. As a disclaimer, we're not a political podcast, so don't expect us to dive into this too deep. There's plenty of other great podcasts out there, no matter what point of view you have on it. But from your perspective, and especially living in the country, and I mean, there's that saying in Germany, everything that happens in the US happens in Europe 5 years later. So no matter where you're at, you're going to be affected by it at some point. What's your general take on it? I know it's a difficult situation to just wrap around quickly, but whatever your emotions are towards this conflict and the way it's handled maybe as well, because the conflict is one thing, but the way it's done is not very diplomatic, I'd say.
I would agree. Look, it's tough. These are big egos. These are people who are at the top for a reason, right? Musk,
Hmm.
you could debate anything you want about Musk, but the guy has been on a, literal rocket ship to the top.
Yeah.
Put
He's
it,
one of the most influential people for a reason,
yeah,
no matter if
and
you
no
like him or not.
influential, wealthiest person in the world. Anyway, but you don't get there because you're either a nice guy or you don't get there because you decide to let other people control the narrative. These are people
Hmm.
that are very, very firm in their constitution of what they believe. And they also have styles which are naturally combative. They're very, in your face, direct. These are, if you've ever met anybody, worked with anybody who just tells you what's on their mind, tells you you're wrong, tells
Hmm.
you that you're a loser or whatever, the things that
Yeah.
come out of both of their mouths, right? It's off putting to see that played out on a national stage or international stage rather is
Hmm.
off-putting times 10.
Yeah.
If you bring it back into the context of a corporation, you wouldn't want to see a public fight even within the four walls of your company amongst many, many people who work there, right? The firm. You wouldn't want to see the CEO and the COO or the CEO and the CFO having this kind of open dialogue. It's sort of the saying is, um, let me show you how the sausage is made. I don't know how that translates in German, but like we don't often expose how the sausage is made. If you ever sat
Right.
in a boardroom, there is this bombastic, in your face, very brutal, direct kind of language. It's sort of like the gloves are off, right? But what we rarely see is this kind of decay of a relationship so rapidly and so publicly. But in a boardroom, you might see it if you're privy to it, if you're one of the ones at the table, This is
Yeah.
pretty typical behavior. You're wrong. No, you're wrong. And then they
Hmm.
go at it. It gets personal. When it gets personal, it gets ugly.
Yeah. Well, the one of the main ways of describing the situation in that journalists use is, and if you try to boil it down to something as free of narrative and ideology and opinion as possible, it's diverging interests. It's they just have opposing interests in this case probably related to something Trump did, the big beautiful bill with the deficit spending and debt coming at the United States in I always got to make sure I say it the right way because the translations are pretty much just similar but the same, but it's trillions of dollars projected
Trillions.
to taken on of new debt, which is a big number.
We're actually gathering about a trillion plus annually
Hmm.
in interest on our debt. That's a trillion in interest, right? We have a debt that's well over $30 trillion in size, and we're gathering $1 trillion in interest or more every year.
Yeah.
So Musk's perspective was, why are you adding to this mess?
Hmm.
We should be cutting back and actually right sizing those budgets so that we can reduce the overall pool, the overall deficit. And of course, politics aside, Doge is very, very focused on cutting costs wherever and whenever possible. You could argue it's indiscriminate. Okay. Some would say it's very much calculated, right? We're going to cut here, we're going to cut there because of the reasons why. Military rarely gets cut. There are good reasons for that. People can
Yeah.
argue.
Yeah. Yeah.
But think about it. Trump and the Congress and the Republican House develop a bill that's going to do a bunch of things over a 10-year period. It's going to cost money. Okay, second, Musk's perspective is you're just adding to that big debt that you already have and all of
Hmm.
that incoming interest that you'll be accruing year over year for those 10 year period. This is the core of the argument, though that's a this is a philosophical debate about spending and cutting and what that impact is to the economy. It's an economic debate. It doesn't need to be on the center stage as a dirty laundry, he said kind of
Yeah.
situation.
Yeah.
Musk's perspective is the wrong way to approach it. Trump's perspective is I have to approach it this way because I need to get all these things done. I mean, they're both opinions on the same subject. It's how they handle themselves is the problem. That's the problem because we, as the citizens of the world, watch this and it becomes buffoonery. It becomes a spectacle. And what you come away with is you lose confidence. Even if you work for these people, you start to lose confidence because you start to see the immaturity and the
Hmm.
infantile behavior and that reduces your respect for the executive. Like back to my example, if we saw what was in a boardroom played out in a town hall at a company, you might change how you view your CEO, your COO, your CFO. You may change how you view these people because you've seen them sort of dig into the dirt, effectively get down to the base level, and that may not be what you as an employee want to see of an executive.
Right. You said how the sausage is made, and that's not always something that you want the world to be able to
That's
tell.
right.
What qualifies a discussion, a topic of diverging interests of just opposition in a leadership group as we maybe segue more into the job market and just in a more of a company context away from politics, because I think politics definitely have a very different dynamic to it at times, but maybe not as much as if you're talking about big public companies that have a lot of media interest. What qualifies a conflict to be taken out public? Is there any context that you could think of where it maybe at least not hurts the company to have something be discussed publicly? Because any decision that's made that is communicated properly and publicly to the people that it affects will probably be something that's accepted by them more likely than not. But of course, there's a level of intimacy of a C-level of leadership, and there's its own dynamics, which we'll get into it later. But to you, is there any scenario where a decision or a conflict that's fought out between two parties in a company is at least not detrimental to a company if it's done publicly in a way.
I think that discussion and debate publicly and privately is a very healthy thing. It's not that we can't have conflict. Conflict needs to be managed. I think that if you look at some companies who've gone through struggles and leadership, their leadership strategy has been challenged. Performance of the company has been challenged. That executive or executives have disagreements about how that company should be run. I think there's some really good historical examples of companies like Apple, where Steve Jobs was actually ousted from the board. He went back to Apple eventually. Right? The way that was handled was pretty much behind closed doors. But let's put it under the microscope. He probably said things in interviews that alluded to some of the disagreements that he and the Apple board, I know that this happened, that he and the Apple board had. In retrospect, you can go back and look at it and you can figure out what was happening with the company at that time. To be critical at a public forum, you have to be very careful. What you're looking at avoiding is the impact or damage to brand. And so the executives have fiduciary responsibility, but a responsibility to protect the brand. And
Mm-hmm.
so if you're going to start attacking each other, you're effectively decaying the integrity of the brand. Because if you're a public company, confidence in that public company is going to wane. Do these people know what they're doing? They're at loggerheads. They disagree. How can they actually be an effective leadership team? Someone has to go. And you know this happens. You've seen it because you've seen high profile exits from a horde of popular and large companies.
You said as an executive, you're there to protect the brand,
Right.
not just in the way it performs, but also in the way it's perceived and the
That's right.
publicity around it. Doesn't it change just potentially if you look at some stories around Nasdaq companies about big public companies? Doesn't it change so quickly that the guy that or the person that was protecting a company is the one that is then fought by its own company because of the performance is bad or there's other forces in that company that want his seat? I feel like there's so much, I wouldn't call it ego in every single scenario, but there's so much self-interest, which is justifiable in some cases, in most cases, but there's so much self-interest in it where it's hard to decipher between, is he trying to protect the company, is he trying to protect himself because he believes that with that person at the head of the company will that the company will do as good as possible, or the people that are trying to get his job are would be a detriment to it. Where do you draw the line as a leader when it comes to the relationship you and your company have? Because the company, at a certain point, especially public companies, are an organism of itself. It's not about one person that runs the thing and it tops down. It's an organism, and it's just a system that runs on its own, regardless of the people in it, theoretically. So where do you draw the line as a leader? And one of the questions that we want to ask today is, how do you lead without constantly looking over your shoulder? I'd say that's probably very, very closely knitted to the system you find yourself in and the company you find yourself in. But as a leader yourself, what are the things in your daily habits or the way you treat people, the way you interact with peers and other C-level members to kind of protect yourself from going into that fight or flight mode? My head is on the line. I got to protect myself.
Look, in public companies, even small private companies, it's all the executive level of the company's CEO, let's just say, is all about stakeholder management. Okay, well, shareholders are different aspect of who you have to manage. You have a board, you have an executive team, the people that work for you. The CFO works for the CEO, the COO works for the CEO. Okay. They're stakeholders. They're not decision makers as much as they're not ultimate decision makers, but they all have an input into the process. The CEO is the ultimate decision maker in a corporation. But the CEO leverages the leadership team, they leverage the board. Then they have their management leadership teams, and they have the staff that actually support them. They have partnerships and suppliers. They have all sorts of, they have the community as a stakeholder. Their customers are a stakeholder, right? Where they operate, the city, the
Yeah,
community
yeah.
around them has become stakeholder. So you have, as an executive, you have to be very, very careful about creating these messes that go beyond the boardroom,
Mhm.
because of all of that stakeholder management. Like I said before, the ultimate is to protect the brand. You want to continue to drive the performance of the company. You don't want to put any doubt in anyone's mind that there isn't something good going on here, that everything is good. Your
Mhm.
numbers are a report card on the
Mhm.
performance from a financial perspective, but they also include lots of sentiment around your ability to execute and innovate and drive an organization and execute on the mission. And so we have stakeholders that we have to worry about as we navigate this journey of how to keep that company afloat, right? It's not easy. And so the last thing you want to have is somebody nipping at your heels, right? And I think
Mhm.
this is your question, right? Is like
Yeah.
I would always say to my teams that, my people that have reported to me and leaders that have reported to me is that they all want to get to the top, right? So you think about it this
Mhm.
way. If you look at it like a triangle, right? So the very base of the triangle is the broadest base of the triangle, right?
Mhm.
This is where you have the most opportunity as a early career professional, someone who's young, who's really entry level, that are kind of like trying to find a job in a corporation. The next band is a little bit smaller in that triangle, and that's where the middle management is. Okay, these are the
Mhm.
people that are the senior managers, directors, senior directors, right? But
Mhm.
that very tippity top of the triangle, right, that I just showed you, is that executive layer. And that's very, very small. The
Mhm.
population there is in the 0.0%.
Mhm.
So you have a lot of competition. You have to be
Mhm.
concerned about your position, your value add, your contributions, making an impact, because the fear is that that very small population, there's someone else that wants to get into that circle. And so if you look back at the triangle, your early career, there's a lot of opportunity for taking risks. There's a lot of opportunity for finding interesting roles and learning. The middle, you're starting to establish your leadership strategy, and it's a smaller pool of qualified people. And the very tippity top is going to be a group of people that are driven to drive an organization, a company, a business, whatever. That
It's
little pool is tough to stay in. I just want to
yeah.
say.
Yeah. There's I had the pleasure of talking to Sebastian Vollmer, which is one of the first European players to make it to the NFL, and he was an offensive lineman, left tackle, and for the Patriots in the Tom Brady era, and I think he won 2 rings. And we talked, and I mean, obviously, football is a business. The NFL
Yeah,
especially is.
it is.
And he said the thing you constantly live with is to realize that there is countless of hugely talented, well decorated players that are coming for your
Yeah,
job every single day.
that's right.
And he said, and then I asked him, how do you deal with that knowledge and how do you sort of step into a practice, into a game with confidence while knowing that there's plenty of SEC, Big 12, Power
Yeah.
5 kids that want to get that job and that want to protect for Tom Brady. And he said, well, number one is I know that the Patriots organization is creating an even playing field where there is no ability, no possibility for you to play dirty. If a guy's better than me, then he'll take my job. Point blank zero. But I know from my own experience, it hasn't happened to me, unfortunately. But I know that especially in those ranks of business and those type of companies, we would lie to ourselves if we would think that everything happens fairly. There's dirty plays there. There's dirty
Yes,
tactics and
there
just
are.
trying to blackmail people. And what I'm very curious about is how to deal with that sort of scenario as a person that tries to keep their morals and their values intact while still maintaining that position they hold, while somebody's biting at their heels, playing dirty.
Look, you need to be a diplomat, and you need to be a bit of a, I guess, a kind of a mind reader in some ways. Like you have to figure out what other people's motivations are as you get to know them, right? I was been in a bunch of teams in my life. Mentioned, was an early career employee, serving an organization and then leading an organization later career. And as you get into those positions, you have peers. And your peers is what you're alluding to, effectively the pool that you're running with. And there are people have different motivations. They have different ideas, agendas, we might call them, right? So you have to be careful. Nobody wants to be too vulnerable and look weak, and they become a target potentially, or they're abused in some
Mm-hmm.
way, taken advantage of. But I'd say what's worked for me is trying to understand the other person's perspective, try to understand what motivates and makes them tick, and then Also, what works for me is transparency, being very clear in what I do, what my role is, understanding the swim lanes between
To
what I
whom?
do with a peer, right? So the under, when you're communicating with peers, saying, this is what my team does. This is what we're good at. This is what we're asked to do. This is what we're meant to do for the organization. What does your team do? And getting a clear sense of where your responsibilities are and what the other person's responsibilities are. So that's like a clear definition of a role and responsibility in the organization. When you find there's overlaps between those 2 points, that's where the tension comes in. And this is where the potential infiltration comes in that you're talking about, which is that person says, you know what? I could take that over too. I've seen it,
Right.
by the way, Joel. I've seen it.
Mm-hmm.
I've been in
Mm-hmm.
those boardroom discussions where people are lobbying to take over your piece of the pie.
Mm-hmm.
I've actually had it inadvertently given to me and taken away from me. Like, and I never like sought to take on more. I've accepted what has come, but I've also had the opposite where things were removed from my remit. And that could be painful for a period. Well, it's painful for the people who are doing the job because they have to get a new manager or a new boss, right? But when those kinds of things happen, you have to question, was that the person, my peer, motivating that change? Or
Yeah.
was it my leadership saying this isn't working? Or I have a different view of how I want to run next year's business. So I'm going to shuffle around these piece parts. But those are the things. There's the other element that you're tapping into with these questions is psychological safety. When there's no psychological safety in a team, you feel like, well, maybe I'm next, or maybe my team is next. And so this backbiting and nipping at your heels and looking over your shoulder, this kind of language that you're introducing, this is what executives have to contend with day in and day out. And now in mature, respectful, healthy organizations, there's less of it, thank God. But in
Mm-hmm.
immature, toxic, diseased environments, you have a lot of this. And I can tell you from my own experience, Joel, that I've seen both. I've seen the very healthy and the very unhealthy.
Mm-hmm.
And it's not fun. It's not fun at
No,
all
I
to
bet
be
it
in.
isn't. There's one thing I had to think about, and that's why I'm asking it, because as someone that's starting their career and the goal is being in some of those positions at some point, I'll tell you a story why I'm struggling with this whole thing a little. David Andrews was the starting center for the Patriots, another guy that protected Tom Brady in all of his Super Bowl rings with the Patriots. He's an undrafted guy, won I think 4 Super Bowl rings, decorated player, 8-time All-Star, all those things. And after 12 years, he got cut. Not because he retired, not because he was old and they weren't getting out of him what they wanted. And sure, everybody always says it's a business, but when these things happen, it still makes you think. And Dave Andrews has its own podcast, and he talked about the being cut and how he's continued with his career. And he said one thing that stuck with me, and it's from Bill Belichick, what he always said about the career. Bill Belichick always said, "There's a light at the end of the tunnel, and you just hope it's not a train coming to run your ass over." And to become successful in those sort of positions with that high pressure, with that pressure to perform, to do your best, it takes a lot from a person that I believe only a person that's healthy in itself, mentally, physically, can truly do. We're talking about sports, we're talking about leadership and big public companies. How do you protect yourself, as you said, emotionally, psychologically, from being the subject to the business side of things, where it's, we love him so much. I know it from football. My coach could love me to death. If I'm not blocking my guy, I got to go. Point
Yeah.
blank zero. But how do you protect yourself from it? Because I can't find the segue between detaching myself emotionally from the job I'm doing, because I know that light at the end of the tunnel could be the sun, could be the promised land. It could also be a train coming at me, but still stay in a mental space where I can perform and do my job and thrive and enjoy it. Because what else to not then enjoy the job you're doing if you're spending so much time at it, right?
I mean, the recipe for success with that scenario is success. So if you have the ability to drive performance, you keep the heat off of you, right? So if your organization your functional remit as a team is doing what they're supposed to doing and it's contributing positively from the perspective of progress for the company, earnings, growth, those kinds of things. If you're delivering, like if you're a sales organization and you're delivering on your number, you're exceeding your number, you're bringing in top line revenue, and you're seen as a positive force in the company. If you're failing, say a regional sales leadership, and you're failing, you're going to have the microscope on you, right? So success is going to keep the heat off of you, and it's going to mitigate some of this sort of noise between channels I see typically inside
Mm-hmm.
organizations. When we're not successful, it's when the finger pointing starts. It's
Mm-hmm.
well, it's marketing's fault. Well, it's product management's fault. No, it's engineering's fault. No, it's support's fault. No, it's our executives' fault. So we got to get rid of our executives. It's like all this finger pointing happens because when you're not successful, the psychological safety like leaves the room. It's like air getting sucked out of a room. There's a vacuum. And so when you have success and you're all focused on the same thing, there's alignment. That's the recipe for success, right? Is making
How does that saying stand up in an environment that's not successful? Because sure, you can control what you can control, but what if you're the only wheel that's turning in a dead car? How does, I mean, is the only way to get out of there?
No, it's okay. So there's one respect, there's an opportunity in that position, which is you have strong belief that things that you're doing can help change the company and materially progress the company in the right direction. Now, that's a tough thing when you're in a lower level position because your voice is not heard. We've talked about this before. When you don't have visibility, it's sort of like in the movies when that kid from the mailroom comes into the boardroom and he says something brilliant, and then the CEO turns around, "We need you here." That unfortunately that rarely happens, right? But if you are one of those people that have a fairly loud voice in the organization and you can help the organization right the ship, you can help be that compass. I think that's a very useful thing. I wouldn't bail or abandon ship. I would say what you do is you try to bring solutions to the table until you've exhausted all those solutions, and then you say, look, there's something bigger going on here. The company can't be successful. We talked about this in another episode about knowing when it was the right time to leave.
Mm-hmm.
This is going to help you lead to that doorway. You're going to be like, I've tried this, I've tried this, I've tried this. If everybody is doing what they think is the best for the company, for the customer, for the world, whatever the scenario is, if we all have a shared vision and purpose, then we'll all act with that sense of purpose, and then the results will hopefully be positive. Okay, this is
Mm-hmm.
kind of how things are perceived in corporate world. We all know what to do. We know what our goals are. We have our
Yeah.
quarterly objectives. We're trying to drive growth up. We're
Yeah.
trying to cut costs. We're trying to make ourselves more efficient, et cetera. If we all share a common sort of objective and a common vision for what
Yeah.
success looks like, then we all run to it. If we're all running to it and all the stars align, our customers love our products, people love working at the firm, all the positive things happen, then more or less the way to the top happens. That sort of that navigation up and to the right to growth happens. But I've been in many companies where you had all the right people, you had all the right ideas, but the market wasn't ready for what we were selling, or we couldn't find our way through the market. We didn't have product market fit, things like that. Those are different scenarios and different problems.
Mm-hmm.
A loud and positive voice like yourself saying, guys, we should try this, we should try this. If we don't have product market fit, that means no customers are interested in buying our product because it doesn't solve a
Mm-hmm.
need or a pain point for them. That's a very different scenario. But if we say product market fit aside, that people want to buy what we have to sell, but we're not doing a good job executing on the mission, then
Yeah.
loud voices with positive ideas and constructive feedback are very welcome. And they can be game changers. Those people can say, hey, we should look at it this way, or we should look at it that way. And if you can get those people in front of the people that matter, like I've talked about before, that small group of people that make the decisions for the company, if you're one of those people that get into that circle, then guess what? You can help influence those people to make that decision and start to
Right.
turn the tanker, so to speak.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. Yeah. So it's basically a team is as good as its weakest link, pretty much.
It is, and sometimes the whole thing is weak because it's the wrong idea, it's the wrong market, it's the wrong time. That macroeconomic effects of systemic issues are too large. You gotta understand kind of what's going on around the company, what's going on inside the company in order to make that distinction. But I'd say as long as you approach this as I'm coming this from a positive, constructive perspective. I want to make this company succeed. My role, I'm going to do the very best in my role to do that. I'm going to try to influence my leadership and the leaders around them. I'm going to bring fresh and new ideas to the table. There should be no harm in that. That's all
Yeah,
positive.
yeah, absolutely. Well, what I'm really curious about, because you teased it a little, is what happens in C-level meetings. I mean, I worked as an assistant to the CEO once. I've been in positions where I work directly with C-level people. I know a few people that do, but it's sort of it's a mystery of what truly goes on. I can imagine, as you said, that it gets loud and sometimes a little hairy, and it's probably difficult to just put one scenario overall, but the general vibe, unless there's a big clash, company is belly up in the water, whatever, the general vibe in, or maybe even before you, like you have a physical meeting and everybody walks in and you have a coffee and you chat before the actual thing starts. Is there a moment where it kind of flips into something where it's this is personal and this is business? Or is everything personal, and which way would you like to have it? What do you think is productive and good for a company?
You can't check your personality at the door. You bring that every day to work, but decisions that for the firm should be based in business logic. They shouldn't be personal. It just like we shouldn't do this because I think we should do this or I feel we should do this.
Feeling no.
I should bring a business case with data, right? That
Yeah,
that
yeah.
that others can analyze and assess and then say, yeah, I see why because the numbers tell us that this is a good idea just because you think or feel something is a good idea. So that's like bringing your person to the table. Now, if you're trying to solve a moral issue for a company, your personality definitely comes out. We should definitely have a policy to protect people from harassment. I mean, companies understand this. We're
Or a
bringing,
minimum amount of women in C-level
yeah, like
suites, like stuff like that.
we'd like to get
More
a
for
certain
yeah.
certain kind of person in a position because we've been running at a deficit for decades. It's funny you said when things get personal versus, when you see them sort of turn ugly. I worked for a small startup in London for many years back in the early 2000 timeframe. And my head of sales, we'll call them chief revenue officer, and our head of engineering got in a very, very heated argument inside the
The
office.
typical two branches in a
Yeah.
company, the
Well,
sales and tech is
yeah,
yeah, yeah.
and the sales leader was basically saying, "I'm out there busting my hump, you know, selling this stuff, and you guys got to make it work." Well, they ended up getting in this really bad, back and forth over the table, and it went so far as let's step outside, and they went onto the green around the corner, and they had a fist fight.
Really? That's amazing. I think sometimes they need that. As an American football player, if I watch any other sport, especially soccer, and they like square up, there's compilations on YouTube where it's like Sunday league football where they like walk up to each other and act. I'm like, fight, do something
Yeah.
actual. And then there's scenarios in life where I'm like, I think a fight between those two guys, get all that testosterone out, all those hormones might not be a bad thing. I don't know if it's a great scenario for business, but I mean, I've never heard that to be actually true. I always thought it was more like a fantasy or a funny
I, I
thing.
don't I don't think I would have seen that. It very much felt like a disagreement over a soccer match. It did. That's what it felt
Hmm.
like. It felt like
Hmm.
he was dissing his team and the other one was dissing their other person's team, and it felt like their football club or whatever, and it felt like a disagreement. It's funny. I remember. I'll give you another sort of story, and it's not about work. It's more personal, but I have a friend. When I lived in France, my family years ago, about 10 years ago. We lived in France. I remember a good friend of mine was helping me move some furniture from one place to another for
Hmm.
our house. And we had this big lorry, this big truck, and we were going down this narrow road. And this other person that was coming the other way, and they didn't want to let us pass. And so he's French, and so he's very kind of,
Okay.
he's got the passion, and so
Yeah.
he's like, what, so what, and he's just saying everything in
Uh-huh.
French, swear words in French. And I goes, okay, I got this, I got to deal with this, And so he gets out, he shuts the lorry off right there in the middle of the road. He gets out of the vehicle. He walks over to the guy who's also gesticulating. He's angry. He's frowning. He's saying things in
Yeah.
French, and they're fighting back and forth. And then it goes for like, I'm not even kidding you. It went for like 20 seconds, and then there's a handshake, and then the guy backs up, and then he gets back into the lorry, and we just sped past him, and he waved as he went past him. So I said, what did you say to him to get him to move? And he said, and again, you can bleep this out if you like. He goes, "You're an asshole. I'm an asshole. We're both assholes. Which one of us is going to move?" And then the guy said, "You're right. We're both assholes." And he goes, "I'll move." And then he backed up. And he told us, this is all in French. It is all in French. I don't know what those words are, but you're an asshole. I'm an asshole. We're both assholes. So now what do we do next? That little bit of it, by the way, that little intervention taught me everything I needed to know about cultural differences between how we might approach it as an American versus a French person versus two different cultures. But to watch that interplay, it gave me a lesson in business, is that like, okay, we can be at a complete disagreement, but at some point we're going to be completely stalled, and
Yeah.
someone is going to have to give a little bit in order for the other to pass. Like, we have to come up with creative ways to solve problems. We can't just come to the table with, firm no. We have to
Yeah.
find a way. We have to find a way to yes. And I
Yeah.
think this is the kind of dynamic that you see mature, responsible, respectful leaders engage in. They go, we don't agree. They can be even very angry. They could, two guys that went out to the green to do the fist fight. They could all be very angry at each other, but they have to find a way to work with one another in order to progress.
The cultural differences are very real. I mean, Norway is very different than Germany. I think it was the former president of the Russian Republic, or the Soviet Union back then, I believe, Gorbachev, said that the Germans couldn't storm a train station because they would have would have to buy a ticket first.
Right.
It's just, that one happened, like the bickering behind closed doors. Oh, he's asshole, and oh, by the way, this is a cussing podcast, so we're
Okay,
not going to
good, good,
bleep
good.
nothing out. But it's the bickering behind closed doors is more common than
It
fisting
is.
the table, and
It is.
just things being taken care of in a different manner. Like my coach back in JUCO, when two guys would fight, like in practice, play football, you block somebody, they don't like it, they're mad, they don't having a good day, you start a scramble. He would do Oklahoma drill. For everyone that doesn't know, Oklahoma drill is a very popular drill, not nowadays with all the safety precautions, but it was. It's, if that, a bag in the middle and two guys lining up across each other, and then it's just mano a mano, who can move the other guy back and forth. And he would take him, he would let him fight for 10 seconds, and if they were still a little huffy and puffy after. You just interrupt practice, get coach to put a bag down there, put them both, and then whomever, and they just let them hit each other. And then one guy won, the other didn't, or they just stalled out, and they were good. And they were sitting back at dinner after practice, just all laughing, and oh, you're my brother. And so yeah, I see that point. I think there's different dynamics and things you can do. I don't know if an Oklahoma drill is something you should let your CEO and CFO do every once in a while. Maybe that works well. But I mean, especially I would say about people that work in sales and that are successful in sales, you have to be a personality. It's not a job that you can do and be shy and timid and you know.
This comes down to cultural values and corporate values, and having a really strong sort of vision of how we operate. What are our corporate values, and how do we exhibit those corporate values? We'll have disagreements. Everybody has a voice. No one's voice is less than the other. Everybody has an opinion. It's fine to have opinions, but we should treat people with respect. We should hear them out. We should listen. We shouldn't talk over them. We should all want to win. Like I said earlier, if we're all moving in the right direction, we'll all win. Companies define their values. These are the kinds of things that they tease out. Like, we're going to have disagreements. We're not always going to agree. but we're going to come to the table with the best of our ideas and we're going to find a way forward. You think this through. It's like, if you don't have these values in place, like for instance, think about respect for another leader. Like,
Hmm.
if you disparage another leader in front of your team, what do you think that they're going to think about? One, that leader. They're going to have doubts about that other leader, but they're going to have doubts about you.
Yeah.
Would, if you shit talk another leader in front of your team, and you know what I'm talking about, right? Trash talking, you shit talk. If you trash talk the coach, they're going to not only have doubts about the coach, but they're going to have doubts about you.
We had that in JUCO. We had our assistant coach talk shit about our head coach. And it's like no matter where you stand, and it's a beautiful segue into the last question I want to ask you today. But it's like our head coach says this, then it was a small school, so the head coach had a lot of other things to do. Assistant coach ran practice a few times. Coach said we're going in only helmets. Assistant coach said we're putting on shoulder pads. And it's like you're standing there, and then there's also these subtle things. Oh, I don't like it because that, and because he's a dumbass or whatever. You're in the middle of it, and on one side you might think whatever you believe about head coach, but also it's, to me, it was very weird seeing that organization, that level of trust that probably never really existed, but that happening in a way that there was no actual conflict that you could see between the two, but it was behind each other's back, just talking
Yes.
down, talking shit. And as I said, we'll segue into the last part of this. What I'm really curious about and what I'm facing in a way myself is if you're not at that leadership level yet, or if you're at a mid management, you're a VP, you're a manager, you're a senior manager, and there is something going on between, let's say, the CFO and the let's paint a picture here. The CFO and the CTO are having a dispute. The CTO says, we need to build this feature, and he's telling you, build it, but the resources going into it are not in the budget, and the CFO says, we're going to stop right here. It's not going to be built. And then probably somebody from sales says, but I sold that to the client. It's in the
Yeah.
contract. So, where is it? I need it tomorrow. And you're sitting in between the chairs. Your own behind is on the line in some way, because at the end of the day, you're a developer, you're a manager, and you're going to be measured by the results that come out. And you don't want to sit there and just point fingers, but he said, but he said, but he said, because you want to recommend yourself for a bigger role down the road. What you talked about a lot was like, in a way, like spatial awareness, like understanding the people around you and what their motives are and how they function, and just understanding the general goal of the company and how you can align with that. But how do you position yourself in the scenario where there's conflict above you that has a
Yeah.
direct and indirect effect to you? And how do you protect yourself without becoming someone's pet in a way?
Yeah, understood. Look, this is a complex issue. People underneath this scenario are put in a bad position. They need to deliver, like the salespeople, right? That you just mentioned, right? They have a job to do. The job was to go out and spin up interest and drive that conversion to a sale. And they get a sale, and then it's a future for the product. And the CTO says, "Yeah, we can do it. It's feasible. We can get it done." And that person maybe makes a promise, or makes a commitment that they haven't gotten the resource for, and then they go back into the boardroom and they fight it out with the CFO. CFO says, look, in order to do that, you got to give up something. You can't have your cake and eat it too. This is where, like, that level of conflict there is is very that's where data can help. Okay, that's where somebody can go, look, if we do this, it's going to bring this much more value to the firm. It's going to create or capture this particular value. If that homework is not done, the CFO is going to look at it and go, look, I don't, you could ask me all day long. I'm going to say no, because you haven't given me the business case. You haven't given me the ammunition to make this decision. Can a CFO make a bet and say, look, I know this is going to blow our budget, but you've given me all the information I need to say that if we don't do this, we're going to lose the opportunity. Or if we do this, we're going to create new opportunity. Team at the bottom that's being affected can be part of the data gathering, can be part of building the strategy and the message, the rationale for selling that. Then I
Mm-hmm.
think that's going to help. You're also going to create credibility in that level with the decision makers. Oh, we don't just go out and say the customer wants this. We can give you the data. We've surveyed 10 customers, and 8 out of 10 want this. And in fact, they want it now, and they would have bought if they had it. And oh, by the way, let's look at the economics. We would have made XYZ, would have grown the business by ABC. All of that information gathered in a logical, rational way provided to both parties. CTO would say, see, this is why I'm pushing you so hard. CFO would say, I understand, but we have to give something up. What? Now, this is negotiation. What can you do? What can you not do that can help us free up resource time? Who else can we shift off of project A to go to project B? Because you say project B is more important. And project B will capture those 8 out of 10 customers you just showed me. This is responsible, healthy, mature behavior. You
Mm-hmm.
don't want to put the people who bring you the opportunity at risk. You do not want to make because you know what happens, Joel, is those people who keep sticking their necks out are going to eventually give up. I've been burnt. I've been burnt. I've been burnt. They get burned 3 times and then they go, I'm not going back here. I'm going to do the very
Fooled me
bare
once.
minimum. It's a killer for morale. It's a killer for motivation, execution. So, the very best thing that team can do is sort of take the emotion out of it. Yeah, I'm going to not make my commission this quarter if you don't deliver this deal. But the best ones in that position, and we're framing this as a sales to engineering to finance relationship, but the best ones are going to take the emotion out of it. They're going to bring the data to the table. They're going to make the business case. And both parties are going to go, yeah, you're right. We got an opportunity here. We got to make a change. The CTO has to give up a little bit. I've been in this position, I don't know how many times. Joel, this scenario you painted is like an everyday occurrence in product
Mm-hmm.
management. It's like an
Mm-hmm.
everyday occurrence. There's no like endless, what would we say? There's no money tree. Like kids
Yeah.
go to the ATM and they say, Dad, just, get more out of the
No donkey
machine.
that's shitting gold coins. Yeah.
Yeah. There's no gold at the end of the rainbow. There's nothing, none of
Yeah.
that.
Yeah.
That concept that we can just continue, it's back to our first discussion. We're going to just keep dumping money into the economy and keep raising the debt up and up and up and up. You don't have a money printing machine. We don't as companies have a money printing machine. We have to bring money in order to generate the income, the operating income to be able to drive the business. And we have to have more coming in than we spend in order to make profit. And so that dynamic is very precarious when you're in that position. What you asked as a sub question is, how do I avoid being the pet? And this is sort of where you build your alliances, okay? Where you build your alliances inside the company. Do you want to be known as the guy who back channels to engineering and says, finance isn't doing their job. I'm not going to make my number because they're not doing their job. Or the guy who's telling tales about engineering and saying we need to get rid of this guy because he or she isn't, delivering on our engineering goals, which are contributing to me not making my number. You got to figure that out. I mean, in all cases, I think transparency and respect and diplomacy, negotiation, those are all the skills that you need to bring to the table. Nothing is going to be productive if we have sidebar conversations and try to do this sort of like sphere of influence thing between parties. It's sort of like pitting 2 parents against each other. Well, dad said I could do it. No, mom said I could do it. And then the mom and dad get together and they go, well, did you say that she could do it? Well, no, I didn't. I heard you said he could do it. No, and that's a totally bad situation because then those 2 people, we were talking earlier about this, bringing this sort of public thing in front of an audience, right? And the actual potential damage there. It's at home. You can see it as well. You don't fight in front of the kids. You don't tell the kids, oh, mom did something bad, or you don't tell the kid, oh, dad did something bad. And I did, you want to avoid this sort of chatter between parties. The conflict is between these 2 people. Why should I be stirring the pot down here if the
Mm-hmm.
conflict is
Mm-hmm.
between these 2 people? Why am I going to create a new conflict by stirring the pot between these 2 people? So we have to be mindful of how we approach that very sensitive dynamic.
Absolutely. So I guess you could say that in either scenario, if you're in C-level or if you're in one of the levels before that, it goes back to what we talked about today in the last few episodes, and it's something that gives me a lot of hope because it's something that you can't cheat at the end of it. If you're in a healthy environment, then you're going to thrive by doing the right thing, being productive, being a good person in a sense, to say it very simply and very easily. And it's awareness of your surrounding, That's something that makes a lot of sense because unless you're a single person agency, you're going to have to deal with people. And even then, you got customers and different kinds of stakeholders.
Healthy companies will have dialogue and debate.
Mm-hmm.
Healthy
Mm-hmm.
companies, healthy organizations, healthy communities will have dialogue and debate. There will be
Mm-hmm.
differences. Healthier will have will accept criticism and accept feedback and be able to take it in, evaluate it, determine whether or not they need to act on that. There's a saying,
Mm-hmm.
feedback is a gift. Okay. Now,
Mm-hmm.
in healthy organizations, you build strength through communications and collaboration.
Mm-hmm.
Feedback is a part of that communication. And it's an important element to get across, which is at that C level, they can provide each other feedback. It's not about what you say, it's about what the other party hears. So you have to be
Mm-hmm.
very careful in how you deliver the feedback. You're not shaming the person, you're not condemning the person, you're not insulting the person. You're providing constructive input and you're giving it from your perspective, but you're also making it open ended. So there's a two-way dialogue where you can have a conversation. If we work hard at building those channels, those two-way channels, keeping them clear from noise, you can cut down on a lot of this back and forth that goes on behind these boardroom doors. You can cut down a lot of the noise that you see out in the main lobby where the employees live. If we are better at communicating, if we are better at delivering and receiving and evaluating feedback, we could have a whole episode on that.
Yeah, absolutely. But it always boils down to the culture that is put in place by the people that started the organization.
It's
If
that
that's
corporate
not there,
value. Yeah.
yeah, if that is not non-existent, then you'll burn yourself out at the end of the day.
I mean, good companies, you can, there's hundreds, there's thousands, there's a million of them actually in the world, and they've been in the world. The best companies, when they founded the company, they figured out what they wanted to be. They defined their vision, mission, and strategy. But the thing that
Mm-hmm.
they did before they launched, the very best one said, what kind of company do we want to be? And that was intrinsic inside those statements. They defined the corporate or the corporate culture. They said, what kind of company do we want to be? And in that
Mm-hmm.
mission statement, they probably articulated what kind of company we wanted to be. We want to delight our customers. We want to engage and get the very best out of our employees. We want to, take as many, we want to create and drive innovation. And what do you do in a culture that you want to drive innovations?
Yeah.
You invite in ideas. You
Yeah.
bring people to the table, right? So the best of the smallest companies and the largest companies, the big successful ones that we always talk about, they thought about their mission, vision, and strategy, and they embedded what kind of company, from a cultural perspective, what kind of company they wanted to be in that process. Smart companies do that, and when you do that, by the way, it's really hard to do that after the fact. If you've grown
Mm-hmm.
from like 100-person company to 1,000 or 10,000-person company, and you go, maybe now is the time when we start thinking about the corporate culture.
Yeah.
It's
Yeah.
always harder to do that. Do it up front. What kind of company do we want to be?
Yeah.
Right?
Yeah. Absolutely. Well, Stephen, thank you so much. Let's go and enjoy this beautiful weather that we both have. It looks like, are you in Miami or in you in?
I'm still in Miami. I'll be back in Boston in July. I'm enjoying the sunshine.
You're going against the grain, spending the summer in Miami and the winter in Boston. It gets
No,
pretty
I will
gnarly
not.
up there,
No,
right?
I didn't say I would be spending the winter in
Okay,
Boston.
okay, okay.
I typically go back midsummer for a little bit of that like late summer New England
Yeah,
experience and into the fall, and then I head back here early in the winter. And I'll be honest with you, it's I mean I'm fortunate and blessed to be able to do that in my life. I've worked very hard. My wife and I worked very hard to get here, but what we really wanted in our life was to have the ability to be where we wanted to be when we wanted to be there. And,
mm-hmm.
that's it's back to that sort of life planning,
Yeah,
goal planning. It's like,
yeah,
you could figure this out on paper, but it's about collaboration. It's how do you get there? And in our case, it took a long time, but we're here. But now we get to enjoy it. So I get to go outside, walk across the street and go to the beach. And then,
yeah.
in a month's time, I'll be walking in a forest in the backyard of my place in New England.
Yeah, I was about to say because I experienced Miami. Tampa in this case, but probably pretty similar in terms of weather. Tampa last year in October, and it was splendid, as the UK brothers and sisters would say. It was great. It was 80s. It was sunny. It had a little wind to it. It wasn't
Yeah.
too hot, not too warm. Coach has a hot tub and a pool right in front of his house. A gated community. You can just tune out all the things that are going on
Nice.
in the world and just experience good weather and wealth from football. So that was a good combination. But I came from a very cloudy and rainy Germany to a very hot and sticky Texas. From that I went to Florida to a very beautiful Tampa. From that I went to Colorado to a very snowy and cold Colorado, and then I came to Illinois, which is sort of like the common denominator. It was in the mid 70s to low 70s. The sun was out, not always, so I have an appreciation for different weathers and the different seasons all over the country. So I was like, you better spend the good part of this the winter in Miami. Better
Yeah,
than the rest
we
probably.
definitely, and variety is the spice of life. Taking the journeys
Yeah,
that you've taken, taking the journeys I've done, it's always about getting different perspectives, experiencing new things, things like that. So it's good, very good.
awesome, awesome, awesome. Thank you so much, and I'll see you.
Thank you, Joel. Cheers.
Bye.